Hello, boring dreamers. Today we are going to abandon our memory foam mattresses and climate-controlled bedrooms to wake up in a world where comfort is a myth and survival is a daily lottery. We are drifting back to the Middle Ages, a time romanticized by fairy tales, but actually characterized by dysentery, mud, and a general lack of personal space. Picture yourself opening your eyes, not to the glow of your smartphone, but to the damp, dark interior of a wattle and daub hut that smells suspiciously like a wet dog mixed with old cabbage. You probably won't survive this week statistically speaking. Your immune system is already waving a white flag, but let us see how far you get before the inevitable happens. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is. I love imagining the map of our little sleepy community. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your consciousness returns slowly, pulled from the void, not by a gentle marimba alarm on your phone, but by a sensation of profound, damp grittiness. You are lying on your side, your cheek pressed against something that feels less like a pillow and more like a sack of aggressively scratchy dried grass. This is a straw pallet, and it is the closest thing to orthopedic support you are going to get for the next 7 days. There is a distinct lack of lumbar support, and you can already feel a dull ache radiating from your hip bone, a nagging reminder that ergonomics is a science that won't be invented for another few centuries. You keep your eyes closed for a moment, hoping that when you open them, you'll see your ceiling fan or that poster on your wall, but the air gives it away. It's cold, a bone-deep, damp chill that ignores the rough wool blanket you're huddled under. And then there is the smell. It hits you before you even take a full breath. A complex bouquet of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, livestock, and something sharp and acrid that makes your eyes water. It's the smell of humanity before plumbing, a scent so thick you feel like you could slice it with a knife and serve it on a cracker. You peel your eyes open. The room is dim, lit only by the gray, filtered light seeping through cracks in the wooden shutters. There is no glass in the windows. Glass is a luxury for cathedrals and kings, not for you. You are in a single-room dwelling, the floor made of packed earth that has been beaten smooth by generations of feet. It's covered in rushes dried reeds scattered about to provide a layer of insulation. Historians still argue whether these rushes were changed frequently to maintain hygiene, or if people simply added new layers over the old, trapping decades of debris, grease, and pests in a sort of geological strata of filth. Looking at the dark, matted clumps near your face, you decide not to investigate which theory is correct. You try to sit up, but a sudden rustling sound freezes you. At the foot of your bed, if we be being generous enough to call it that, a goat is staring at you. Yes, a goat. In the Middle Ages, body heat is a precious resource, and livestock are essentially organic space heaters. The cow, the chickens, and the pigs often share the living quarters during the colder months. While this is efficient for thermal regulation, it does mean your roommate is a ruminant who has zero respect for personal boundaries and will absolutely chew on your hair if given the chance. You swing your legs out from under the scratchy wool. Your feet hit the dirt floor, and the cold shoots up your shins. You are wearing a linen shift, the medieval equivalent of underwear and pajamas rolled into one. It feels rough against your skin, hand-spun and stiff. You instinctively reach for a thermostat that isn't there, realizing with a sinking heart that the temperature in this room is whatever the temperature is outside, minus the wind chill. The concept of indoor climate is currently limited to, is the fire lit? And is the door closed? Speaking of the fire, in the center of the room, you take your first tentative step away from the relative safety of the doorway and immediately regret it. Your foot, encased in a simple leather turn shoe with a sole about as thick as a modern piece of cardboard, sinks an inch deep into the muck. This isn't just mud. It is a dark, sticky slurry composed of rain, soil, kitchen scraps, animal dung, and human waste. In the Middle Ages, the street is not merely a thoroughfare. It is a linear landfill, a communal dumpster that you are currently wading through. You try to hop to a drier patch of ground, but you slip, your arms windmilling comically as you barely avoid face-planting into a pile of something that was definitely alive a few days ago. As you regain your balance, you look up and realize just how claustrophobic this city feels. The streets are incredibly narrow, winding pathways that seem to have been laid out by a drunken spider. Above you, the second and third stories of the timber-framed houses jut out over the street, a feature known as jetties. They extend so far that in some places, the neighbors across the street can lean out their windows and shake hands. This architectural quirk maximizes square footage for the homeowners, but for you, the pedestrian down below, it blocks out almost all direct sunlight. You are walking in a permanent, gloomy twilight, a shadowy canyon where the sun is a rumor and the dampness never quite evaporates. And then the smell hits you again, but out here in the open, it is more complex, a symphony of odors that your modern nose is woefully unequipped to parse. It isn't a single bad smell. It is a layered experience. The base note is wood smoke, which is actually quite pleasant, reminiscent of a cozy campfire. But layered over that is the heavy, sweet scent of rotting garbage. There is no weekly trash pickup here. Households simply throw their refuse into the street or into a designated midden heap in the backyard. Historians still argue whether medieval citizens were nose-blind to this stench due to constant exposure, or if they complained about it just as bitterly as we would today. Given the number of court records from the era finding people for leaving dead horses in the alley, it's safe to assume they noticed. You trudge forward, trying to breathe through your mouth, which turns out to be a mistake because you can practically taste the air. You pass a butcher's stall, the shambles. Here, hygiene standards are practically non-existent. Carcasses hang on hooks, buzzing with flies that look big enough to carry off a small cat. The butcher, a burly man with a stained apron, is tossing offal directly into the kennel, the central gutter running down the middle of the street. Blood mixes with the gray water, creating a colorful but horrifying stream that flows sluggishly toward the river. You realize with a start that your immune system is currently screaming in terror. Navigating this street requires a specific set of motor skills. You are doing the medieval shuffle, eyes glued to the ground to avoid the worst of the filth. You notice that some of the wealthier pedestrians are wearing pattens, wooden overshoes with raised iron rings on the bottom that lift their expensive leather boots a few inches above the muck. It's essentially the medieval version of an SUV for your feet. You, however, are in a sedan, low to the ground and feeling every bump. It's not just the ground you have to worry about, it's the traffic. There are no lanes, no stop signs, and certainly no pedestrian right-of-way. A cart pulled by two massive oxen comes trundling around a blind corner, the wooden wheels grinding loudly against the cobblestones. You press yourself flat against the rough wattle and daub wall of a house to let it pass, feeling the vibration of the heavy beast as it lumbers by inches from your nose. Behind the cart, a flock of geese is being herded toward the market. Geese, you discover, are essentially feathery velociraptors with zero fear. One of them hisses at you, extending its neck like a cobra, and you actually flinch. You're being bullied by poultry. As you continue your perilous morning commute, you hear a shout from above, "Gardy-loo," or perhaps a local variation of the warning. Your brain, recalling high school history trivia, screens move. You sidestep just as a splash of dirty water cascades from a second-story window, hitting the spot where you were standing a second ago. While the specific phrase "gardy-loo," from the French garde au lot, is more associated with later periods like the 18th century, the practice of emptying chamber pots into the street is timelessly medieval. You look up to see a woman shaking out a basin, completely unbothered by the near miss. You give her a weak, terrified wave. She does not wave back. You turn a corner and the smell changes, becoming sharper, acrid, stinging your eyes like chopped onions. You have stumbled near the tanner's district. Tanning leather is one of the most essential industries of the time. Everyone needs shoes, belts, and saddles, but it is also the vilest. To cure the hides, tanners use a mixture of dog feces, urine, and lime. The stench is so powerful that medieval zoning laws often banished tanners to the outskirts of town or downstream. But the wind is not respecting those boundaries today. It smells like a chemical fire in a petting zoo. You pull the collar of your linen tunic up over your nose, gagging slightly. If you had to leave a Yelp review for this neighborhood, it would be 0 stars. Would not recommend breathing here. Despite the assault on your senses, you notice something strange. The noise. It's loud, but it's a human loudness. There is no hum of engines, no sirens, no electrical buzz. Every sound is distinct. The rhythmic clang, clang, clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the sharp rasp of a saw, the crying of a baby, the shouting of merchants hawking their wares. It is an organic, chaotic soundscape. You hear a bell tolling in the distance, marking the canonical hour. Time here isn't measured in minutes or seconds on a digital watch. It's measured by the church bells. Terce, sext, none. You have no idea what time it actually is. Only that the bell is telling you to pray, or work, or eat. You find yourself wishing for a quiet park bench, but public space, in the modern sense, doesn't really exist. The street is the living room of the city. People are working outside their shops. Children are playing games with rocks and sticks in the gutter, and 2 women are having a heated argument over the price of turnips right in the middle of the path. You are forced to weave through them, muttering apologies that nobody understands because your accent sounds bizarrely foreign to them. You are an alien in a familiar shape, a time traveler stuck in the rush hour of the 14th century. Your stomach gives a loud, treacherous rumble. The smell of the roasting meat from the cookshop you passed earlier is warring with the stench of the gutter, and surprisingly, hunger is winning. You realize you haven't eaten since you arrived. You need water. You need food. But looking at the brown sludge in the street and the questionable hygiene of the butcher, you realize that obtaining lunch is going to be a survival mission in itself. You have navigated the street without vomiting barely, but now you have to put something into your body. And that, my friend, is where the real danger begins. The mud on your shoes is starting to cake, drying into a crusty, brownish shell, but your mouth is doing the opposite. It feels like you have swallowed a handful of that very same dust. The sensory assault of the tanneries and the butcher shops has triggered a primal biological response. You are incredibly, desperately thirsty. In your modern life, this would be the moment you reach for your reusable, double-walled, vacuum-insulated steel water bottle filled with filtered ice water. You would take a sip, feel the condensation on your fingers, and move on. But here, reaching for your hip yields nothing but the rough fabric of your tunic. You scan the area for a source of hydration. Your eyes land on the river flowing through the heart of the city. From a distance, the water looks almost romantic, glittering under the gray sky, a ribbon of life cutting through the timber and stone. You start to move toward it, your tongue sticking to the roof of your mouth. But as you get closer to the bank, the romantic filter falls away, replaced by a high-definition horror show. The river is not clear. It is a sluggish, opaque brown, moving with a heavy lethargy of gravy. You watch a dead cat float by, bobbing gently in the current, followed closely by a basket of rotting vegetable peelings. Just upstream, you see a group of washerwomen beating clothes against rocks, the water turning a murky gray around them as centuries of grime are released into the flow. And a bit further up from that, you spot the runoff from the tanners we just escaped, a colorful toxic plume swirling into the main current. This is the great medieval paradox. Water is everywhere, yet drinking it feels like playing Russian roulette with your gastrointestinal tract. You hesitate at the water's edge. You know about cholera, dysentery, and typhoid. You know about giardia and cryptosporidium. The people around you, however, do not. They lack the concept of germ theory. To them, disease is a matter of bad air, miasma, or an imbalance of the four bodily humors. They don't know that the invisible monsters swimming in this river are waiting to turn their insides into liquid. But here is where we hit a nuance often lost in pop culture. You might have heard the myth that nobody drank water in the Middle Ages, and that everyone, from toddlers to grandparents, chugged wine and beer all day long because the water was instantly lethal. This is a bit of an exaggeration. Historians still argue whether the preference for brewed beverages was strictly a safety precaution against pathogens, or simply a cultural preference for calories and flavor. The truth is, people did drink water. If you were a peasant working in the field and you were parched, you drank from a stream. You just hoped it was a fast-flowing one, far away from the city. But you are in the city. Drinking this river water is essentially licking the floor of a public restroom. You decide to steer clear of the riverbank. What about a well? You spot a stone circle in a small plaza, a wooden bucket resting on the lip. This seems safer. Groundwater is filtered by the earth, right? You approach, hopeful. But as you lean over to look into the depths, you notice the proximity of the nearest house. Specifically, you notice the location of their suspect. Stepping out of the alehouse, your confidence bolstered by the mild buzz of small beer, you follow your nose toward the unmistakable scent of baking dough. In any era, hot bread smells like safety. It is the universal comfort food, the aromatic signal that civilization is functioning. But as you approach the baker's stall, dodging a stray pig that is rooting enthusiastically through a pile of refuse, you need to adjust your expectations. You are not about to buy a fluffy, sliced loaf of preservative-laden white bread. You are about to engage in a dental hazard. Bread is the absolute fuel of the medieval engine. It makes up about 60% to 70% of the daily caloric intake for the average person. But bread in the Middle Ages is strictly hierarchical. If you were a noble, you would be dining on manchet, a soft, white wheaten loaf sifted to remove the bran. It is light, airy, and looks vaguely familiar to modern eyes. But you are a peasant, or at best, a confused traveler with no title. You get the maslin, or perhaps the horse bread. You hand over a coin, a small silver penny you found in your pocket, let's say, and the baker hands you a dark, dense brick. It feels heavy, like a weapon you could use to stun a burglar. The crust is thick and hard, designed to protect the soft-ish interior from dirt and vermin during transport. You find a relatively dry spot on a low stone wall, sit down, and prepare to feast. You take your first bite and immediately stop. Crunch. A sharp, jarring sensation shoots through your jaw. You haven't hit a hidden walnut. You've bitten into a rock. This is the dirty secret of medieval milling. The grain is ground between two massive millstones. Over time, the friction causes the stones themselves to wear down, shedding fine grit and sand directly into the flour. There is no FDA regulation to filter this out. You are effectively eating sandpaper. This is why, if you look at the skulls of medieval skeletons, the teeth often look like they've been filed down flat. By the time you reach 40, if you make it to 40, your molars might be ground down to the pulp, leading to agonizing abscesses. Toothaches in this era are not a minor annoyance. They are a potential death sentence from infection. So, you learn quickly. Chew cautiously. Treat every bite as a potential ambush. As you gingerly navigate the geological features of your lunch, you examine the dark grains in the loaf. It's mostly rye and barley. But wait, what are those purplish-black specks? You pause, the piece of bread halfway to your mouth. You have just stumbled upon one of the most terrifying culinary Russian roulette games of the Middle Ages. Ergot. Ergot is a fungus, Claviceps purpurea, that loves to grow on damp rye. To a medieval peasant, it just looks like a discolored grain. They grind it up with the rest of the flour. But when baked and eaten, it unleashes a cocktail of alkaloids similar to LSD. This isn't the fun kind of hallucination, though. It's a condition called St. Anthony's fire. First, your fingers and toes start to tingle. Then comes a burning sensation, so intense it feels like your limbs are literally on fire, hence the name. Gangrene can set in, causing extremities to turn black and fall off. And then, that itch on your shoulder isn't going away. In fact, it's migrating. It started near your collarbone, traveled down your spine, and is now hosting a small festival near your left kidney. You reach under your tunic to scratch, your fingernails raking against skin that feels strangely clammy, and you pull your hand back. Under your nails, you find a tiny, pale speck. It moves. Congratulations, you have just met the most common resident of the Middle Ages, the body louse. In the modern world, lice are a playground crisis, a reason for panic emails from the school principal, and a frantic trip to the pharmacy for special shampoo. Here, they are simply a fact of life. They live in the seams of your clothing, thriving in the warm, humid microclimate created by your body heat and the layers of fabric. Because you rarely, if ever, change your outer garments, and because bathing is a logistical nightmare involving hauling buckets of water from that questionable well we visited earlier, the lice are living their absolute best lives. To them, you are not a person. You are a luxury resort. You try to brush the thought away, but the sensation of 100 tiny legs traversing your torso is maddening. You are wearing a linen shift against your skin, which is supposed to be the clean layer. The theory is that the linen absorbs your sweat and oils, protecting the outer wool from getting dirty. This is why medieval people were obsessed with white linen. A pristine white collar or cuff was a status symbol, showing you could afford to wash your underlayer frequently. Yours, however, is a dingy shade of gray, stiff with sweat and grime. It hasn't seen a wash tub in weeks, and frankly, neither have you. Over the linen, you are wearing wool. Heavy, coarse, unforgiving wool. If you are imagining a soft merino sweater, stop. This is rough spun wool, full of guard hairs that prickle like needles. It still retains the natural lanolin of the sheep, which makes it somewhat water-resistant, a good thing in this damp climate, but it also means you smell like a wet barnyard animal every time it rains, which is often. The weight of the clothing is surprising. Without modern synthetic fibers, warmth equals weight. You are carrying several pounds of fabric on your shoulders. The tunic hangs to your knees, belted at the waist. On your legs, you aren't wearing pants. Trousers as you know them, 2 legs joined at the crotch, are considered barbarian fashion in some circles, or just not the norm yet for your class. Instead, you are wearing hose. These are individual fabric tubes, one for each leg, pulled up and tied to your belt or your underwear, rise, with little strings called points. This leads to a very specific medieval danger. Wardrobe malfunction takes on a literal meaning here. If the knot on your left leg comes undone while you are walking, your pants literally fall down, or rather one leg of your pants slithers down to your ankle like a dead snake, leaving you exposed to the biting wind. And speaking of exposure, the back of your legs, specifically the upper thighs and seat, might be less covered than you'd like. As you bend over to adjust your shoe, you feel a draft in a place. You are exhausted. The mud, the sensory overload of the city, the near poisoning at the bakery, and the constant battle against the cold have drained your battery to zero. All you want is to lie down. In your modern life, this is the best part of the day. You fluff your hypoallergenic pillows, pull up your high thread count duvet, and sink into a mattress engineered by NASA scientists to align your spine perfectly. But as you collapse onto the bed in the corner of the hut, you are essentially throwing yourself onto a compost heap that has been vaguely shaped into a rectangle. Let's talk about your mattress. It is a sack of rough linen stuffed with straw. If you are lucky, it's fresh straw from the recent harvest, smelling faintly of summer fields. If you are unlucky, and let's be honest, it is old straw. Straw breaks down over time. It gets pulverized by the weight of sleepers, turning into a fine, dusty chaff that puffs up into your face every time you roll over, triggering a sneezing fit. But worse, straw absorbs moisture. It absorbs the ambient humidity of the damp house, the sweat from your feverish dreams, and the occasional leak from the roof. This creates the perfect, warm, rotting environment for a thriving ecosystem of fungi and molds. You try to get comfortable, but comfort is a relative term. The straw is lumpy. There are stray stalks that have poked through the fabric, stabbing you in the ribs like tiny wooden daggers. You shift your weight, trying to find a hollow for your hip, and that's when the bed starts to fight back. You feel a sharp, sudden prick on your ankle, then another on your calf, then a burning itch on your neck. You smack your leg reflexively, but your hand comes away empty. You have just been welcomed home by the fleas. In the Middle Ages, fleas are not an infestation. They are a roommate. Everyone has them. From the lowest peasant to the king of France, nobody is immune. Historians still argue whether the widespread practice of carrying small lapdogs by noble ladies was intended to act as living flea traps, hoping the fleas would prefer the dog's higher body temperature over the human Esser, or if they just really liked spaniels. For you, however, there is no spaniel to take the hit. You are the buffet. You lie there in the dark, scratching. The itch is intense, a histamine reaction that makes your skin feel hot and tight. But you can't scratch too hard, or you'll break the skin. And in a world without antibiotics, an infected flea bite can turn into a necrotic ulcer that costs you a leg. So you lie there, twitching, engaged in a silent, losing war against an enemy you can't see. And fleas are just the infantry. If you smell a sickly sweet odor, something like rotting raspberries or moldy coriander, you are in the presence of the heavy artillery, bedbugs. These little vampires live in the wooden crevices of the bed frame, if you have one, or in the cracks. You peel yourself off the straw mattress, brushing away a few lethargic fleas that are sleeping off their blood meal hangover. You survived the night, which is a statistical win, but as you step out of the gloom of your hut and back into the gray morning light, you are entering a biological minefield. If the visible dangers of the Middle Ages, the mud, the fires, the starving dogs, don't get you, the invisible ones certainly will. You are walking through a petri dish that has been left open in a warm room for 1,000 years. You see your neighbor, let's call him Thomas, leaning against the wattle wall of his house. Thomas is 25, which means he is in the prime of his life, yet he looks like he's been through a war. His face is a roadmap of scars, deep craters and pits that mar his skin. These are the souvenirs of smallpox. In the modern world, a face free of pockmarks is the standard. Here, it is the exception. If you meet someone with smooth skin, you assume they are either incredibly lucky or they just haven't caught the pox yet. Smallpox is a childhood rite of passage, a grim lottery where the prize is survival with disfigurement, and the consolation prize is death. Thomas waves you over. You approach, because social distancing is a concept that won't be invented until roughly 2020. In the tight-knit communities of the medieval city, personal space is non-existent. People talk close nose-to-nose close. Thomas leans in to tell you a rumor about the price of barley, and as he speaks, he unleashes a wet, rattling cough directly into your face. You feel the microscopic droplets hit your cheek. In your mind, you see a neon red biohazard sign flashing. You know that those droplets are loaded with Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Thomas has consumption, or phthisis. It's a slow, romanticized wasting disease in 19th century literature. But here, in the 14th century, it's just a miserable, hacking slide into the grave. But you don't recoil. You don't wipe your cheek in horror. Why? Because you don't believe in germs. This is the most terrifying part of your week, the ignorance. You believe in miasma. You believe that disease is caused by bad smells, vapors, rotting in the earth, or drifting off swamps. You think you get sick because you inhaled the scent of a dead cat, not because Thomas just aerosolized his lung tissue onto your lips. So instead of washing your face with soap, which is rare and harsh, you instinctively hold a small bundle of herbs, nosegay, or tussie-mussy, to your nose. You sniff the rosemary and lavender, convinced that the sweet scent will block the bad air and protect you. It is the equivalent of trying to stop a bullet with a perfume sample. As you politely listen to Thomas wheeze, you notice a sore on his lip. That tickle in your throat hasn't gone away. In fact, after your encounter with Thomas and the leper, psychosomatic dread has turned it into a full-blown ache. Your head feels heavy, your joints feel stiff, probably from sleeping on a dirt floor, but you're convinced it's the early stages of the plague. You decide you can't risk it. You need a doctor. Or, more accurately, since you can afford a university-trained physician who speaks Latin and charges a year's wages just to look at your tongue, you need a barber surgeon. You head toward a shop identified by a very specific symbol, a pole painted with spiraling red and white stripes. In the modern world, this signifies a haircut and a hot towel. Here, the symbolism is far more literal. The red stands for blood, the white stands for the bandages used to staunch it, and the pole itself represents the stick a patient squeezes to make their veins pop out during the procedure. You are not going to a salon. You are going to a place where a little off the top might refer to a limb. You step inside. The air smells of stale, iron-dried blood mixed with herbs and vinegar. The barber is a burly man, apron stained with dark splotches, currently sharpening a terrifyingly small knife called a fleam on a leather strop. He motions for you to sit on a low wooden stool. You explain your symptoms, the headache, the throat tickle, the general malaise. He nods sagely, not checking your temperature or listening to your heart, but instead reaching for a glass flask. Piss, he says. This is the cornerstone of medieval diagnostics, uroscopy. You are handed the flask and instructed to fill it behind a screen. When you return, the barber holds it up to the light like a sommelier inspecting a fine vintage. He looks at the color, the sediment, and the foam. But he doesn't stop there. Here is a quirky, stomach-churning tidbit for you. To be thorough, a dedicated physician might actually taste the urine. Sweetness indicates the pissing evil, diabetes, while other flavors hint at different organ failures. You watch, horrified, as he takes a small, thoughtful sip, swishing it around his mouth before spitting it into a bucket. Sanguine, he declares, wiping his mouth. You have too much blood. Welcome to the Galenic theory of humors. The medical establishment believes the body is a container of four fluids: blood, hot and wet; phlegm, cold and wet; yellow bile, hot and dry; and black bile, cold and dry. Sickness isn't caused by germs. It's caused by sloshing too much of one fluid around. Your fever indicates heat, which means you are overloaded with blood. The cure is simple logical subtraction. Remove the blood, remove the fever. The dizziness from your recent bloodletting makes the world tilt slightly to the left, but the roar of the crowd acts as a grounding force, pulling you toward the market square. You might assume, given the noise, that a festival is taking place, perhaps a juggler, a bear baiting, or a miracle play. But as you push through the throng of unwashed wool and leather bodies, the mood shifts. It isn't the joyous raucousness of entertainment. It is the sharp, jagged excitement of vengeance. You have stumbled upon the medieval version of primetime television, public justice. In the center of the square, raised on a wooden platform so everyone can get a good look, stands the pillory. It is a simple, brutal piece of carpentry, a hinged wooden board with holes for the head and hands. Locked into it is a man you recognize vaguely. It's the baker, the one who sold you that rock-hard bread earlier. He is bent over, his face red and swollen, exposed to the mockery of his former customers. His crime? Selling light bread. In a world where food consumes the vast majority of a peasant's income, shortchanging a customer on a loaf of bread is not a misdemeanor. It is a direct attack on the community's survival. The assize of bread and ale is one of the earliest consumer protection laws in history, strictly regulating the weight and price of loaves. This baker tried to save a few ounces of flour, and now he is paying for it with his dignity. But the pillory isn't just about standing there. It is interactive. The crowd is armed. They aren't throwing tomatoes are from the Americas and won't arrive for centuries, but they are throwing rotten turnips, mud, dead rats, and buckets of night soil, human waste. The baker is caked in filth, weeping, while the townspeople jeer. This is the essence of medieval law enforcement. Shame, without a centralized police force or a prison system to house criminals long term. Prisons are mostly for holding people until trial or for political hostages. The community is the punishment. The goal is to destroy the offender's social standing so thoroughly that they might never recover. You watch, mesmerized and horrified. A woman near you screams an insult and hurls a clod of dirt that hits the baker with a sickening thud. You flinch. You want to look away, but looking away makes you suspicious. In a crowd like this, participation is mandatory. If you don't look angry, people might wonder if you are a sympathizer. So you arrange your face into a grimace of disapproval, trying to blend in. As you stand there, trying not to faint from the combination of blood loss and the smell of the angry mob, you realize just how precarious your own position is. You are a stranger here. You have no family to vouch for you, no guild to protect you, and no lord to claim you. In the eyes of medieval law, you are a vagabond or a masterless man. This is practically you manage to slip away from the mob justice in the market square, ducking into a quiet, narrow alleyway to catch your breath. The adrenaline is fading, replaced by that bone-deep weariness we discussed earlier. You lean against a timber-framed wall, closing your eyes for a moment. You need a distraction. You need to center yourself. Without thinking purely on muscle memory honed by years of habit, you start humming. It's just a tune stuck in your head. Maybe it's a Taylor Swift bridge, or perhaps the catchy jingle from a fast food commercial. You start to mutter the lyrics under your breath, tapping a rhythm on your thigh. It's a comfort mechanism. A tiny piece of home in this alien world. What is that tongue? The voice is sharp, cutting through your reverie like a knife. You freeze. You open your eyes to see an older woman standing in the doorway opposite you. She is wearing a wimple that frames a face etched with suspicion. She isn't looking at you with curiosity. She is looking at you with fear. You realize, with a jolt of horror, that you are singing in English, but not her English. You were speaking a dialect that won't exist for another 600 years, full of vowel shifts and slang that sounds like gibberish to her ears. To a medieval peasant, an unknown language spoken in a dark alley isn't foreign. It's incantation. You stammer, trying to switch to a more archaic tone, but the damage is done. She makes the sign of the cross, her eyes darting to your strange, smooth hands, your suspiciously clean teeth, relatively speaking, and the peculiar way you carry yourself. You don't walk like a peasant who has spent 20 years bent over a plow. You walk with the upright, loose-limbed gait of someone who does yoga and sits in an ergonomic chair. You are uncanny. You are other. And in the Middle Ages, other often spells witch. Now, Before you panic and imagine a stake being erected in the square immediately, let's dial back the Hollywood drama slightly. The burning times of the massive witch crazes are actually more of an early modern phenomenon, 16th and 17th centuries. In the High Middle Ages, the Church's official stance is often that witchcraft is a delusion, a superstition of the uneducated. Historians still argue whether the average medieval peasant was truly obsessed with hunting witches, or if they largely relied on cunning folk and local healers for magical aid without blinking an eye. However, the line between helpful healer and malicious sorcerer is razor thin and depends entirely on one thing: results. If the cow dies after you look at it, witchcraft. If the butter won't churn, witchcraft. If a storm ruins the harvest, definitely witchcraft. And you, with your weird humming and your strange accent, are practically waving a red flag at a bull. You try to smile at you have escaped the accusations of witchcraft and the angry mob, but you still have a problem. You are conspicuous. You are loitering. And in a medieval city, loitering is suspicious. To blend in, you need to look like you have a purpose. You need to look like a cog in the machine. You spot a construction site nearby scaffolding, clinging to the side of a half-built stone structure, likely a merchant's guild hall or a church extension. It is a hive of activity, a symphony of shouting men, creaking wood, and the rhythmic clink-clink of chisels. You decide this is your camouflage. You roll up the sleeves of your scratchy tunic, dirty your face with a bit more mud for good measure, and walk onto the site, looking for something heavy to lift. A foreman, distracted and shouting at a cart driver, shoves a wooden hod into your chest. It's a V-shaped box on a pole, designed for carrying bricks or mortar. He points a calloused finger toward a ladder and barks an order you don't quite catch, but the gesture is universal. Move that pile of stuff up there. You look at the pile. It is wet mortar, a dense gray slurry of lime, sand, and water. You shovel it into the hod. In your modern life, you might consider yourself fit. Maybe you hit the gym 3 times a week. Maybe you can hold a plank for 2 minutes. You are about to learn the humiliating difference between gym muscles and peasant strength. You hoist the loaded hod onto your shoulder. Or rather, you try to. The weight is staggering. It drives your feet into the mud. Your spine compresses with a sickening crunch. This isn't the barbell balanced perfectly for ergonomics. This is dead, shifting weight that fights you every step of the way. You grit your teeth, your core trembling, and take a step toward the ladder. The ladder itself is a death trap. It is made of rough-hewn timber, the rungs held in place by wooden pegs and lashings. It sways ominously as you place your foot on the first rung. There is no OSHA here. There are no safety harnesses, no hard hats, no steel-toed boots. If you fall, you land on the cobblestones, and the foreman simply hires the next guy waiting by the gate. You cling to the ladder with your free hand, the rough wood driving splinters into your palm, and begin the ascent. Halfway up, your quadriceps are burning with an intensity that makes you want to cry. You look down mistake and see the chaotic bustle below. You see a massive wooden wheel, like a giant hamster wheel, turning slowly. Inside, 2 men are walking endlessly, powering a treadwheel crane that lifts massive blocks of stone. It is a marvel of medieval engineering, a testament to human ingenuity using simple physics to move mountains. But watching those men inside the wheel, you realize they are human engines. They will walk that wheel for 10 hours today. They are not doing cardio. They are slowly grinding their joints into dust. You reach the top of the scaffolding and dump the mortar. Your shoulder is throbbing where the hod dug in. You are panting, gasping for air that smells of lime dust. The mason working there looks at you. He is a wiry man, half your size, with forearms that look like twisted ropes. He doesn't look tired. He looks bored. He scoops up the mortar with a trowel, continuing his work with a fluid, effortless rhythm that makes your struggle look pathetic. This brings us to a fascinating scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the medieval peasant actually worked less than the modern employee. Some calculations suggest that due to the immense number of church holidays, saints' days, weddings, and seasonal lulls, a peasant might have had up to 150 days off a year, far more than your standard 2 weeks of vacation. However, looking at the mason, you realize the nuance. Days off didn't mean lounging at the beach. It meant going to church, repairing your own hut, or doing the 1,000 other tasks required to stay alive. And when they did work, the intensity was something your body simply cannot comprehend. You climb back down, your legs shaking like jelly. The foreman spots you slacking. He yells again. You go for a second load. This time, as you lift, you feel a sharp, hot tear in your lower abdomen. You drop the hod. It clatters loudly, spilling mortar everywhere. You have just flirted with a hernia. In the medical texts of the time, this is often called a rupture. It is a common affliction for laborers. Without modern surgery to install a mesh patch, a hernia is a life-altering injury. You might have to wear a truss, a leather belt with a pad to hold your insides in for the rest of your life. Or the intestine could become strangulated, leading to a slow, agonizing death from gangrene. You clutch your side, gasping. The foreman is not sympathetic. He grabs you by the shoulder and shoves you toward the gate. You are fired. You didn't last 20 minutes. Dejected, you stumble away from the site, nursing your strained abdominal muscles. You realize that you lack the functional strength of the era. These people have been lifting, carrying, and walking since they were toddlers. Their bone density is higher than yours. Their grip strength would crush your hand. You are a soft, domesticated animal trying to run with wolves, but you are still hungry, and you have no wages. You see a group of laborers sitting on a pile of timber, taking a break. They are passing around a leather jug. You drift closer, hoping for charity. They are drinking ale, this small beer we mentioned, but maybe something a bit stronger for the midday break. This is the nooning or noonchen, a midday snack. One of them tosses you a crust of bread. You catch it, grateful. As you chew, you listen to them talk. They are complaining. They are complaining about the taxes, about the bishop, about the weather. It sounds incredibly modern. But then, one of them mentions a corvée. This is forced labor owed to a lord. They aren't just working for money. They are working because they have to pay their rent in sweat. If they don't fix the Lord's road or harvest his wheat, they lose their land. You realize that freedom here is a very fluid concept. You finish the crust and move on, trying to look busy without actually doing anything. You pass a field on the edge of the city where men are scything grass. The rhythmic swish-swish sounds peaceful, almost ASMR-like. But then you look closer. You see the hunch in their backs. You see the way they limp. You are witnessing the cumulative damage of repetitive motion. Arthritis isn't an old person's disease here. It's a survivor's disease. If you live long enough to get it, you won. As the sun begins to dip, signaling the end of the workday, you feel a strange sense of guilt. You failed. You couldn't hack the daily grind. But you also feel a profound respect. You look at the buildings around you, the cathedrals that took 100 years to build, the city walls, the stone bridges. None of it was built with diesel engines or hydraulics. It was built with calories. It was built with the burning muscles of people who ate rock-hard bread and slept on straw. You, however, are broken. Your hands are already blistering soft, pink bubbles rising on your palms from just a few minutes of friction. Your shoulder is bruised purple. Your side aches. You need to get indoors. The temperature is dropping fast, and the night air, which everyone knows is dangerous, is rolling in. You remember the hut from this morning. It's not much, but it's better than the street. You head back, navigating the maze of alleyways. But as you approach the door, you remember something else. The domestic death traps. You thought the construction site was dangerous? A construction site has hazards you can see. A medieval home has hazards that are silent, invisible, and waiting for you to make one sleepy mistake. You push the door open, coughing as the smoke hits you, and step into the most dangerous room in the city, the kitchen. You slip out of the city gates at dawn, bribing the sleepy guard with a copper coin to look the other way. The heavy wooden doors creak shut behind you, sealing in the smoke, the plague, and the noise. Ahead of you lies the open road. At first your heart soars. The air here is cleaner, smelling of wet grass and earth, rather than excrement and sulfur. The horizon is wide and open. You feel a sudden naive sense of freedom, like a character in a fantasy novel, setting off on a grand quest. But as you start walking, the reality of medieval travel sets in. You are not walking on a paved highway. You are likely walking on a trackway, a ribbon of dirt that turns into a quagmire of sucking mud the moment it rains. If you are lucky, you might be on an old Roman road, the stones still set deep in the earth, a testament to an empire that collapsed nearly 1,000 years ago. But even these are cracked, overgrown with weeds, and riddled with potholes deep enough to snap a horse's leg. The King's Highway is a legal concept, not a maintenance promise. It means you are under the king's protection, but the king is very far away, and the potholes are right here. You are walking alone. This is your first mistake. In the Middle Ages, solitude is dangerous. Merchants travel in caravans. Pilgrims travel in groups. Nobles travel with armed retinues. A solitary traveler is an anomaly. You are a soft target. You look at the dense tree line bordering the road. In the modern world, trees are scenery. Here, they are cover. The forest presses in on the road, dark and impenetrable. You hear a whistle. A bird? No, it was too rhythmic. You stop. The silence of the countryside isn't peaceful anymore. It's heavy. You grip your small eating knife, your only weapon, and scan the bushes. Nothing. You convince yourself it's your imagination, that high-strung paranoia we talked about. You take another step. Suddenly, 3 men step out from behind a large oak tree. They don't look like the dashing swashbucklers of Hollywood movies. They are not wearing Lincoln green tights. They are filthy, wearing tattered motley armor scavenged from dead soldiers. They look desperate. They look hungry. These are outlaws. The term is specific and terrifying. To be an outlaw isn't just to be a criminal. It is a legal status. It means you have been put outside the protection of the law. You are caput lupinum, wolf's head. This means you are no longer considered human in the eyes of the court. You are a wolf. Anyone can kill you on sight without penalty. In fact, killing you is a public service. Because these men know they are walking dead men, they have absolutely nothing to lose. They will not hesitate to slit your throat for your shoes. Historians still argue whether the romanticized figure of the noble outlaw, like Robin Hood, was a genuine reflection of social resistance against corrupt authorities, or simply a literary invention by minstrels to entertain bored audiences who safely ignored the brutal reality of actual banditry. Looking at the man pointing a rusty crossbow at your chest, you are inclined to believe there is nothing noble happening here. Stand and deliver, the leader grunts. It's a cliché because it works. You freeze. Your modern instinct might be to fight back. You've seen action movies. You think maybe you can disarm him. Do not do this. These men have likely fought in wars. They have survived winters in the woods. They are violence professionals. You are a tourist. You slowly raise your hands. They approach you with practiced efficiency. One keeps the crossbow leveled at your gut, while the others strip you. They take your coin pouch. They take your cloak. Then they look at your shoes. Leather is valuable. Off, the leader commands. You hesitate. Walking barefoot on this road will tear your feet to shreds. But he cocks the crossbow. You quickly kick off your shoes. They toss them into a sack. You are now standing in the cold mud in your linen hose, shivering. They check your hands. No rings. They check your teeth. No gold, obviously. They seem disappointed. The leader steps closer, sniffing you. He's trying to figure out what you are. You don't smell like a peasant, but you don't dress like a lord. You are a mystery. For a second, you fear they might kidnap you for ransom. This was a common industry. If they thought you were valuable, they would drag you into the woods and hold you in a cave until your family paid up. But seeing your lack of retinue and your strange, soft hands, they decide you aren't worth the feed. Run, the leader says. You blink. What? Run, before I change my mind. He gestures with the crossbow. He is giving you a head start. It's a cruel game. You turn and sprint. You run barefoot down the rocky path, your feet bruising on the stones. You hear them laughing behind you. You expect a bolt to hit you in the back at any second. The fear is primal. You are now deep in the king's forest, and the silence here is different. On the road, the silence was heavy with the threat of bandits. Here, the silence is heavy with the threat of authority. You crouch behind a massive oak tree, your bare feet throbbing against the damp moss. The canopy above is so thick that it blocks out the gray sky, plunging you into a premature twilight. You think you are hiding in nature, but you are actually trespassing in a highly regulated industrial zone. In the modern world, a forest is a public space. It's where you go to hug a tree or take a selfie with a fern. In the Middle Ages, a forest does not necessarily mean woods. The term comes from the Latin forestis, meaning outside the common law. It is a legal designation. A forest is a territory which can include woods, fields, and even whole villages reserved exclusively for the king's hunting. When you stepped off the road, you left the jurisdiction of the common law and entered the jurisdiction of forest law. This is a totalitarian legal system designed to protect two things: vert, the greenery, and venison, the game. Your stomach growls, a loud, treacherous sound that echoes in the stillness. You are starving. You haven't eaten since that gritty bread hours ago. Ahead of you, in a sun-dappled clearing, you see a deer. It's a magnificent stag, grazing peacefully. Your primal brain screams. Food. You imagine roasting it over a fire, the fat sizzling, your hunger finally sated. Do not, I repeat, do not even look at that deer wrong. That stag is not an animal. It is the king's property. It is essentially a walking, breathing sack of royal gold. William the Conqueror, the guy who set up much of this system in England, was famously said to love the tall stags as if he were their father. If you shoot that deer, you aren't just poaching. You are committing a personal insult to the monarch. The penalties are draconian. In the early medieval period, killing a royal deer could be punished by blinding or castration. Later, it softened to merely hanging or a fine so large your grandchildren would be born in debt. You slowly back away from the deer. Maybe something smaller? You see a rabbit-a-coney dart into a bush. Surely the king doesn't care about a rabbit? Wrong again. While rabbits aren't quite as prestigious as deer, hunting them without a license is still theft. You are surrounded by food, yet you are in a grocery store where the penalty for shoplifting is losing a hand. You look down at a fallen branch. You think, I'll grab some firewood. Stop. That's vert. You cannot cut a living branch, waste, or take fallen wood, a sart, without permission. Even the acorns on the ground are regulated because they are food for the king's pigs. You are standing in a place where your very existence is illegal. You can't eat, you can't build a shelter, and you can't even pick a flower without theoretically breaking a statute. As you creep deeper into the woods, trying to put distance between yourself and the road, you spot a man in the distance. He is wearing green and brown leather, blending perfectly with the foliage. He is holding a longbow. This is a forester or a verger. He is the medieval equivalent of a park ranger, but with the authority of a federal marshal and a really bad attitude. His job is to patrol the forest, arrest poachers, and ensure the venison remains undisturbed. Here is a quirky historical tidbit for you. The forest law was so paranoid about poaching that it even regulated dogs. If a peasant living within the forest boundaries owned a dog, that dog had to be lawed or expedited. This meant the owner had to surgically remove 3 toes from the dog's front paws or cut the tendons so the dog couldn't run fast enough to chase a deer. It's a horrific form of preventative justice. If you had a dog with you right now, and it had all its toes, you'd be fine just for the potential of it chasing a squirrel. You freeze, pressing yourself into the dirt. The forester scans the trees. He doesn't see you. He moves on, disappearing like a ghost. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. Historians still argue whether the Norman yoke of forest law was quite as universally oppressive as the legends suggest, or if corruption was rampant, allowing locals to bribe foresters with ease. But looking at your empty coin pouch, you realize that bribery is not an option for you. You have to rely on stealth. But stealth has a downside. You are now completely lost. You turned left at the big oak, then right at the funny-shaped rock, and now every tree looks exactly the same. The path you are following was just a deer trail, and it has petered out into a tangle of briars. You are disoriented. In the modern world, you have GPS. You have a compass app. You have the sun. But here, the canopy is so dense you can barely tell where the sun is. The forest is a green labyrinth designed to swallow people. Panic begins to set in. It's a cold, creeping sensation that starts in your gut. You realize that nature is not neutral. It is indifferent to your survival. If you break your ankle in a rabbit hole out here, nobody is coming to find you. You will simply become part of the Yevert. As the light fails, the temperature. You survive the night in the forest, but only just. As the sun rises, filtering through the dense canopy in weak, gray shafts, you peel yourself out of the leaf pile. You are stiff, shivering violently, and your feet are numb blocks of ice. The romance of the wild has thoroughly evaporated, replaced by the grim reality that you are a hairless ape entirely unsuited for outdoor living without a North Face jacket. You realize that the risk of the city, the plague, the filth, the people is preferable to the silent, hypothermic indifference of the woods. You limp back toward the road, hoping to find a settlement before your toes turn black and fall off. You walk for miles, driven by a singular lizard brain desire, warmth. You fantasize about a roaring fire. You imagine standing next to a hearth, feeling the heat soak into your frozen skin. Be careful what you wish for. The universe has a twisted sense of humor, and in the Middle Ages, it usually delivers its punchlines with catastrophic force. You arrive at a new town just before midday. It's smaller than the city you fled, a tight cluster of timber-framed houses huddled together behind a wooden palisade. It looks cozy. It looks flammable. You manage to slip inside, blending in with a group of peasants returning from the fields. The wind is picking up, a dry, gusty breeze that rattles the shutters and whips dust into your eyes. You find a spot near a communal oven, a large stone structure where villagers pay to bake their bread and lean against the warm bricks. It is heaven. You close your eyes, finally stopping the shivering. Then you hear it. Not a bell, not a trumpet, but a scream. Fire! Fire! It starts as a single voice, then a chorus. In a modern city, a fire alarm triggers a structured response. Sirens, sprinklers, professionals in yellow trucks. In a medieval town, a fire alarm triggers absolute, unadulterated panic. You open your eyes to see a plume of thick, black smoke rising from a house 3 streets away. The wind catches it, bending the column of smoke sideways, pushing it directly toward the thatched roofs of the neighboring buildings. You should run. You should turn around and sprint back to the forest. But the mob mentality takes over. A man shoves a leather bucket into your hands. To the well. Move. You are conscripted into the bucket brigade. This is the primary firefighting technology of the era. 2 lines of people form between the nearest water source and the fire. One line passes full buckets toward the flames. The other passes empty buckets back. You are in the full line. You heave a heavy, splashing bucket to the woman on your left, adrenaline momentarily overriding your exhaustion. But as you work, you watch the fire spread. It is terrifyingly fast. Medieval towns are built of wattle and daub, wood and straw. They are essentially carefully stacked piles of kindling. To make matters worse, many roofs are thatched with reeds or straw, often coated in tar to make them waterproof. Tar is highly flammable. And remember those jetties we talked about? The upper stories that stick out over the street? They act like a wind tunnel, channeling the heat and flames across the narrow gap, allowing the fire to leap from one side of the street to the other without even touching the ground. The street itself becomes an oven. The heat is intense, searing your eyebrows. The roar of the fire is deafening, sounding like a freight train. You see a man on a roof trying to beat out the flames with a wet blanket. It's futile. The thatch explodes into fire, and he scrambles down a ladder, barely escaping. Then you see the fire hooks. A group of burly men arrives carrying long poles with massive iron hooks on the end. They aren't trying to put the fire out. They are trying to destroy the house next to it. This is the brutal calculus of medieval firefighting. You can't save the burning building, so you sacrifice the neighbors to create a fire break. They hook the ropes around the support beams of a cottage that isn't even on fire yet. They pull. With a sickening crunch of timber, the house collapses into a heap of rubble. The family who lived there stands by, weeping, watching their home be destroyed to save the rest of the town. It's a necessary cruelty, but it hurts to watch. As the bucket brigade falters, The well is running low, or the panic is breaking the line. Someone shouts for ale. Here is a quirky, desperate fact for you. In the absence of water, or when water was too hard to pump quickly, medieval people would use whatever liquid was available. Often, this meant barrels of ale or cider. You watch as a tavern owner rolls out casks of precious ale, smashing the lids. People dip their buckets into the beer. You are literally throwing alcohol, albeit low proof, onto a fire. It works mostly because of the liquid volume, but the smell of burning malt and hops mixes with the wood smoke, creating a bizarre, sweet acrid stench that you will never forget. The wind shifts. The sparks shower down on you. A piece of burning thatch lands on your shoulder. You slap it away, leaving a smoldering hole in your tunic. The fire is winning. It's jumping the firebreak. The town is doomed. Historians still argue whether many of these catastrophic fires were the result of simple accidents, a knocked-over candle, a stray spark, or if fire raisers, arsonists, were more common than we think, using chaos to loot and plunder. In the confusion, you certainly see people running out of burning houses, carrying items that definitely don't belong to them. A man runs past you, clutching a silver candlestick and a wheel of cheese. Is he saving his property or shopping? You don't have time to ask. The order to retreat is given. The bucket brigade dissolves. It's every person for themselves. You turn and run, the heat pressing against your back like a physical weight. You cough, your lungs filling with soot. The smoke is so thick you can't see more than 5 feet in front of you. You stumble over debris, over abandoned carts, perhaps over bodies. You don't look down. You burst out of the town gate, gasping for clean air. You join a huddle of survivors on a nearby hill, watching their homes turn into skeletons of orange light against the darkening sky. The sound of the collapsing roofs is rhythmic, like the drumbeat of a funeral march. You are safe from the flames, but you are in a precarious position. You have lost your shelter. The town is gone. The people around you are in shock, their faces blackened with soot, their eyes wide and white. They have lost everything: their tools, their food stores for the winter, their livestock. A fire in the Middle Ages isn't just a property loss. It is an existential threat. Without that grain stored in the barn, they will starve before spring. You sit on the cold grass, hugging your knees. You wanted warmth. You got an inferno. The irony is bitter. You look at your hands. They are black with soot and blistered from the buckets. You look at your tunic. It's singed and torn. You are a refugee of the flames. But amidst the tragedy, you notice something strange. The survivors aren't just wailing. They are already organizing. A priest is moving among them, offering prayers. A merchant is taking stock of what was saved. There is a resilience here that is hard to comprehend. They know this happens. They know that wood burns. And they know that tomorrow they will start cutting timber to rebuild. It is a cycle of destruction and renewal that has played out for centuries. However, you are not part of this community. You are a stranger, and strangers are often blamed for disasters. You catch a few people looking at you. Who is he? I saw him near the bakery before it started. Wasn't he the one who didn't know how to use a bucket properly? The paranoia of the crowd is shifting from the fire to the cause of the fire. You realize that you need to make yourself scarce. You can't stay here and wait to be accused of being the fire raiser. You need to move on. Again, you stand up, your legs trembling. The fire is still raging, painting the clouds in demonic shades of red and purple. It is a beautiful, terrifying sight. You turn your back on the burning town and walk away into the darkness. You are homeless, friendless, and now potentially a suspect. You need to find a place that is too big to burn down, or at least a place where the fire won't reach you. You remember seeing a castle on the horizon earlier, a massive stone fortress on a hill. Stone doesn't burn. Stone is safe. It seems like the only logical destination. But as you trudge toward the silhouette of the castle, you are forgetting that castles are not hotels. They are military installations filled with armed men who are very sensitive about protocol. You are about to trade the chaos of the fire for the rigid, lethal structure of the feudal hierarchy. You manage to survive the elements, the illness, and the flames, but can you survive a breach of etiquette? You are about to find out that social suicide is just as deadly as the real thing. The fire in the town below is now just a sullen, glowing ember in the distance, a scar of orange against the black earth. You have climbed the hill toward the castle, your legs burning with lactic acid, your lungs wheezing. In your modern mind, a castle represents safety. It's where the police are. It's where the government is. It is a structure of order. You imagine thick stone walls, guards who will ask, "What happened?" and perhaps a warm blanket provided by a benevolent lord. You are about to be disabused of this notion with extreme prejudice. As you approach the outer curtain wall, the sheer scale of the fortification hits you. This isn't the romantic Neuschwanstein castle with fairy tale turrets. This is a machine of war. The walls are scarred from previous sieges. The crenellations, the toothed gaps at the top of the wall, are manned by archers who are currently tracking your movement with the disinterested precision of a security camera. You cross the drawbridge, the wood booming hollowly under your bare, soot-stained feet. The moat below is not a shimmering blue pool. It is a stagnant, green soup of sewage and algae that smells worse than the tanneries. You enter the lists, the area between the outer and inner walls, often used for tournaments or training. It is here that you make your fatal error. You are walking down the center of the path, tired, distracted, and looking for help. You hear the thunder of hooves behind you. In 2025, if a car comes up behind you in a parking lot, you step aside, maybe give a little wave of apology. Here, the rules of the road are dictated by bloodlines. A knight is approaching. He is mounted on a destrier, a massive warhorse bred specifically for violence. The animal is terrifying 17 hands high, snorting steam, its chest muscles rippling like a topographical map of a mountain range. The rider is encased in plate armor that gleams dully in the torchlight. He is a tank made of flesh and steel. Now, here is the mainstream historical fact. Medieval society is strictly divided into the 3 estates. There are orators, those who pray, bellators, those who fight, and laborators, those who work. This isn't just a job description. It is a spiritual caste system. The knight believes, truly believes, that God appointed him to rule over you. You, the laborator, exist solely to feed him and clothe him. In exchange, he is supposed to protect you. But right now, you are standing in his way, which is a violation of the cosmic order. You hear a shout, "Make way, peasant." Your modern brain processes this as a request. You turn around, bewildered. You don't immediately dive face first into the mud. You look at him. You make eye contact. Silence descends on the courtyard. The archers on the wall stop chatting. A stable boy freezes with a bucket in his hand. You have just committed social suicide. In the Middle Ages, gestures of deference are not optional. They are survival mechanisms. You are supposed to doff your cap, remove your hood, bow your head, and avert your eyes. By staring at him, you are challenging his dominance. You are acting uppity, and to a man whose entire identity is built on honor and reputation, your confusion looks like insult. The knight pulls on the reins, the massive horse rearing slightly before slamming its hooves back into the mud, splashing your shins. He looks down at you through the visor of his helmet of bassinet with a pointed pig-faced front. You can't see his face, only the cold, dark slits of steel. He reaches for the sword at his hip. You freeze. You are witnessing the chivalric code in action, but not the version you read about in King Arthur books. Historians still argue whether chivalry was ever a genuine code of ethical conduct that restrained violence, or if it was merely a literary invention and a tool for social cohesion among the elite, basically a club for rich violent men to congratulate each other on being rich and violent. Most evidence suggests that while knights were chivalrous to each other, sparing noble prisoners for ransom, that code rarely extended to the peasantry. To him, you are not a damsel in distress. You are a traffic cone. Insolent dog, he booms. His voice sounds metallic, echoing inside the helm. You do not veil your bonnet to your betters. Veiling your bonnet is the specific act of lowering your hat. You aren't wearing a hat, the bandits took it, so you just stand there, shivering and soot-stained. He takes this as further defiance. He draws his sword not all the way, just an inch, the steel hissing against the scabbard. It is a sound that bypasses your intellect and hits your lizard brain directly. Run, but you can't run. If you run, he will chase you down for sport. This is coarser versus human. You lose. Here is a quirky, terrifying tidbit. In many jurisdictions, there was a specific legal concept called seigneurial justice. If a lord or knight harmed a peasant on his own land, it was very difficult for the peasant to seek redress. The local court was often presided over by ... that same lord. It's like suing the judge in his own living room. If he decides to strike you with the flat of, he spurs the horse forward. The animal's shoulder hits you. It's not a gentle nudge. It's like being hit by a compact car. You are sent sprawling into the muck. The breath is knocked out of you. You lie there, gasping, staring up at the belly of the beast. The horse lifts a hoof, heavy with iron shoes, inches from your head. Mercy, O Lord. Someone hisses from the shadows. It's not you. It's an old servant nearby, bowing so low his nose is practically touching the dirt. He is modeling the correct behavior for you. You scramble into a kneeling position, burying your face in the mud. You make yourself small. You surrender your dignity completely. You are no longer an independent individual with rights. You are a terrified biological organism, hoping the predator loses interest. The knight snorts, a sound indistinguishable from his horse. Filth, he mutters. He kicks his spurs into the horse's flanks and thunders past you, the spray of mud coating your back. He rides toward the inner keep, presumably to drink wine, and complain about the unruly state of the rabble these days. You stay kneeling for a long time, even after the sound of hooves has faded. You are shaking, not just from the cold, but from the humiliation. In your own time, you are a citizen. You vote. You have a name. Here, you are just biomass. The realization is crushing. The castle isn't a shelter. It is a cage where the hierarchy is enforced with steel. You slowly pick yourself up. You are caked in mud again. You wipe your face, leaving streaks of grime. The servant who hissed at you approaches. He doesn't offer a hand to help you up. He looks at you with a mix of pity and contempt. You have a death wish, stranger? He whispers. That was Sir Guy. He took a hand off a miller last week for spilling ale on his boots. You swallow hard, nodding. You have learned the lesson. In the Middle Ages, manners are not about politeness. They are about recognizing the power dynamic so you don't get deleted. You realize that you cannot simply walk around this world acting like an equal. You have to act the part of the serf. Shoulders hunched, eyes down, voice low. You have to make yourself invisible. But your trouble isn't over. By entering the castle courtyard, you have walked into a trap. Castles are hungry places. They consume food, they consume money, and most importantly, they consume men. You hear a heavy clanking sound behind you. Not a horse this time, but a group of men in padded armor, gambesons carrying spears. They are the castle garrison. They are looking for bodies. Specifically, they are looking for able-bodied men to replace the ones who died in the last skirmish. or perhaps to help rebuild the burned town, or maybe just to dig a ditch. You try to slink away toward the shadows of the wall, using your newfound invisible peasant technique. But you are too slow. A heavy hand clamps onto your shoulder. It grips you with the strength of a man who chops wood for a living. "You there," a gravelly voice says. "You look like you have 2 arms and a pulse. That makes you a volunteer. You have survived the fire, the forest, and the night. But you have walked right into the machinery of feudal warfare. You are about to find out that freedom is not just a philosophical concept you lack. It is a physical state you have just lost. You are no longer a traveler. You are now a conscript. And the only thing more dangerous than being a peasant in a castle is being a peasant with a spear you do and know how to use standing, in a line of other terrified peasants waiting for the order to march. A hand gripping your shoulder is not offering a friendly massage. It is a clamp of iron and calloused flesh attached to a man who looks like he was carved out of granite and bad intentions. He is a vintner, a commander of 20 men, and you have just become his 20th volunteer. You try to stammer a protest, perhaps explaining that you are a pacifist, a tourist, or merely a lost-time traveler with a sensitive constitution. He ignores you completely, shoving you toward a pile of equipment that smells like a damp locker room that hasn't been cleaned since the Crusades. "Put this on," he barks, tossing a heavy, quilted garment at your head. This is a gambesson, or an akaton. It is a jacket made of layers of linen stuffed with wool, horsehair, or scrap fabric. In the hierarchy of armor, it is the bottom rung. It is not the shining plate of the knight who nearly trampled you earlier. It is a glorified moving blanket, but do not underestimate it. A good gambeson can stop a sword cut or dampen the blow of a mace. Historians still argue whether the gambeson was the primary armor, for the vast majority of medieval soldiers effectively making them tanky, infantry, or if many went into battle with little more than a tunic and a prayer relying on shields for protection. You pull it on. It is heavy, stiff, and predictably already inhabited. The sweat of the previous owner, who is likely dead, given that the jacket is now available, is embedded in the fibers. It itches violently. You are also handed a helmet. It is a kettle hat, a broad-brimmed steel hat that makes you look like a deadly mushroom. It's too big. It slides down over your eyes, blinding you. You push it back up just in time to catch the weapon thrown your way. It is a billhook. In your modern life, you might recognize this as a gardening tool used for pruning trees. And you would be right. The billhook is the ultimate example of medieval upcycling. It is a curved blade on a long wooden pole, sometimes with a spike added to the top or back. It is cheap, nasty, and terrifyingly effective. It is designed to hook onto armor, drag a knight from his horse, and then, well, prune him. You hold it awkwardly, the wood rough against your blistered palms. You are now a billman. Form up. The vintner screams. You stumble into a line with 19 other miserable souls. They look like you, tired, dirty, and terrified. Some are farmhands, some are apprentices, some are just guys who were in the wrong place at the wrong time. You are part of a levy. This is the reality of feudal military service. When a lord needs to fight a neighbor over a border dispute or a stolen cow, he calls up his tenants. You aren't a professional soldier. You are a mobilized resource. A column begins to march. You aren't heading off to a glorious crusade in a distant land. You are marching 3 miles down the road to a muddy field near a river. This is the scale of most medieval warfare, local, petty, and brutal. It is less Game of Thrones and more gangs of New York with farm implements. As you trudge through the mud, your bare feet now wrapped in rags, someone took pity on you, and through your way, you realize the chaos of the situation. There are no uniforms. Everyone is wearing their own clothes. How do you know who to kill? The vintner walks down the line, tying a strip of red cloth around everyone's right arm. This is your livery. If you see someone without a red strip, or with a blue strip, you hit them with the gardening tool. If the strip falls off in the mud, your own side might kill you by mistake. Friendly fire is not an accident here. It's a statistical probability. You arrive at the designated field. Across the meadow, about 200 yards away, is the enemy. They look exactly like you. They are wearing gambesons, holding bills and spears, and shivering in the cold wind. They probably didn't want to be here either. They probably just wanted to harvest their turnips. But their lord hates your lord, so now you have to murder each other. The two lines form up. The knights, the men at arms, are at the front, mounted on their horses. You are in the back, the infantry. Your job is essentially to act as a human wall. If the enemy knights charge, you are supposed to stand there and stop 1,000 pounds of horse meat with a stick. The tension is unbearable. You expect a speech. You expect, "We happy few, we band of brothers." Instead, you get a lot of shouting and insults. The knights taunt each other. Then a horn blows. The earth begins to shake. The enemy knights are charging. Here is a mainstream historical fact for you. A cavalry charge is not designed to kill you with impact. It is designed to root you with fear. The psychological effect of a wall of horses thundering toward you is overwhelming. Your lizard brain screams at you to run. If you run, the formation breaks, and they hunt you down. If you stand, you might survive. The vintner walks behind your line with a heavy mace. His job is to kill anyone who tries to run. You are trapped between the enemy lance and your sergeant's club. You squeeze your eyes shut, can brace the billhook against the ground, praying to a god you haven't spoken to since Sunday school. The noise is deafening, a cacophony of hoofbeats, screaming metal, and shattering wood, but the charge doesn't hit you. It hits the knights in front of you. The battle dissolves into a chaotic scrum. You can't see anything. You are surrounded by the backs of other men, pushing and shoving. It smells of blood, opened bowels, and wet wool. You are jostled back and forth. You hear screams of pain that sound shockingly human and small. Suddenly, a man bursts through the line in front of you. He is wearing a blue sash. He has a sword. He swings it wildly. You don't engage in a cinematic duel. You panic. You thrust your billhook forward blindly. The hook catches his gambeson. He trips. The man next to you, a blacksmith with arms like tree trunks, brings a hammer down. It's over. You stare at the body. A moment ago, that was a person. Now it is a heap of laundry in the mud. You feel bile rise in your throat. You didn't do anything heroic. You just survived a random collision of atoms. Here's a quirky, grim tidbit. In these localized skirmishes, the goal often wasn't mass slaughter, but ransom. A live knight is worth a fortune. A dead one is just heavy trash. However, this courtesy did not apply to you. There is no ransom for a peasant. If you are captured, you are useless mouths to feed. Often, the winning side would simply execute the enemy peasantry, or maim them, cutting off a hand or an ear to ensure they couldn't fight again. You are fighting a war where the best-case scenario is survival, and the worst-case scenario is becoming a cautionary tale. The skirmish ends as quickly as it began. The enemy lord is unhorsed and captured. His levy, seeing their boss taken, throws down their weapons and runs. A cheer goes up from your side. You don't shear. You are trembling so hard your teeth rattle. You drop the billhook. You want to vomit. The vintner comes by, clapping men on the back. Good work, lads. The Lord is pleased. There will be extra ale tonight. Extra ale. That is your payment for almost dying. That is the value of your life. A pint of sour beer. As the sun sets, the adrenaline crash hits you like a physical blow. The army, if you can call it that, begins to move back toward the castle. But you know you can't go back. If you go back, you are in the system. You will be used again. And next time, the horse might not miss. You linger at the back of the column. As they round a bend in the road, entering the forest, you slip away. You duck into the undergrowth, shedding the heavy, sweaty gambeson. You throw the kettle hat into a ditch. You are deserting. This is a capital offense. If they catch you, they will hang you. But the fear of the hangman is abstract compared to the visceral terror of the battlefield you just witnessed. You run through the darkening fields, guided only by the silhouette of a spire in the distance. The church. In the Middle Ages, the church is a complicated entity. It is a landlord, a judge, and a tax collector. But it is also the only institution that offers sanctuary. If you can reach the holy ground, if you can grasp the knocker of the church door, secular law cannot touch you, at least in theory, for 40 days. It is your only hope. You stumble toward the village, your body screaming in protest. You are a deserter, a vagabond, and a heretic in waiting. You need a miracle. But as you approach the looming stone structure of the parish church, you realize that while the church might save your neck from the noose, it is about to demand something else entirely from your soul. You are trading the physical war for a spiritual one, and the priest waiting inside has eyes that see right through your modern disguise. You see a movement in the wall to your right. There is a small diagonal slit cut through the stone masonry. A hagioscope, or squint. An eye appears in the hole. It is a leper, or perhaps a strictly cloistered anchorite living in a cell built against the church wall. They are not allowed inside the church due to their disease or vows, so this hole allows them to attend Mass without contaminating the community. It is a stark reminder of the social exclusions we discussed earlier. You are inside, but you are only one mistake away from being on the other side of that wall, peering through a hole at the warmth you lost. After the elevation, the tension breaks slightly. The priest moves to the kiss of peace. In the early church, people actually kissed each other. By the late Middle Ages, realizing that kissing random strangers during a plague outbreak wasn't great policy, they introduced the pox board. This is a flat piece of wood or metal, often with a carving of the crucifixion that the priest kisses. He then hands it to the lord of the manor, who is sitting in the front, obviously. The lord kisses it. He hands it to his wife. She kisses it. It is then passed down the social hierarchy, row by row, mouth by mouth. It reaches you. It is slobbered on. It is warm from the lips of the 50 people before you. People with rotting teeth, open sores, and active tuberculosis. You stare at it. This is a biological weapon. But to refuse the pox is a sign of deep discord, a signal that you are not in charity with your neighbors. It could get you fined or branded a heretic. You hold your breath. You press your lips briefly to a dryish spot on the rim of the board, trying not to inhale. You pass it to the next person, a man with a hacking cough who kisses it enthusiastically. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand when no one is looking, but you feel the phantom sensation of 1,000 germs colonizing your face. The service winds down. The congregation begins to file out, gossiping as they go. This is a mainstream fact that often surprises people. The medieval church nave was not just for prayer. It was the village hall. Markets were sometimes held here. Legal contracts were signed here. It was the only large, dry indoor space in town. As the service ends, the solemnity evaporates. Two dogs start fighting near the font. A dog whipper, yes, that is an actual paid job title, rushes forward with a long whip to separate them and chase them out. You, however, cannot leave. You have claimed sanctuary. You have to stay here. For 40 days, you must confess your crimes to the coroner and then choose stand trial, bad idea, or abjure the realm. Abjuring the realm means you swear an oath to leave the country forever. You must walk, barefoot and carrying a wooden cross, to the nearest port and catch the first ship to anywhere. If you step off the road, you can be executed. But that is a problem for tomorrow. For now, you are just trying to hide. You retreat into the shadows of a side chapel, behind a stone effigy of a knight. The church is emptying. The candles are being snuffed out one by one. The air grows colder. The priest walks past your hiding spot. He pauses. You stop breathing. He doesn't look at you, but he says quietly, "The box for the poor is near the door." God sees all, stranger, even empty pockets. He walks away. He knows you are a vagrant. He knows you have nothing, but he lets you stay. It is a small mercy, perhaps the first you have received all week. You settle down on the stone floor. It is harder than the mud, harder than the forest floor. The cold seeps into your kidneys. You look up at the stained glass window. In the daylight, it was a jewel of color. Now, as the sun sets outside, it turns black. The painted demons on the wall seem to shift in the gloom. You are alone in the vast, echoing belly of the church. You have survived the army, the fire, and the law. But now you have to survive the night in a building designed to remind you of your own mortality. And as the last light fades, you realize that the Middle Ages has one final terror in store for you. You have faced the tangible threats. Now you must face the absence of everything. The true pre-industrial darkness is coming, and it is heavier than any armor. The priest extinguishes the final candle near the altar. He doesn't blow it out. He pinches the wick with wet fingers, hissing the flame into oblivion. He leaves through a side door, the heavy iron latch clanking shut with a finality that echoes in your chest. And then you are alone, and you are blind. In the modern world, we have forgotten what darkness actually is. Even in your bedroom, at 3 a.m., there is the glow of a street lamp through the curtains, the standby LED of your TV, the luminous dial of your alarm clock. We live in a world of perpetual, ambient twilight. But here, this is the deep dark. It is a physical weight. It presses against your eyes, thick and velvety. You hold your hand up to your face, wiggling your fingers. You see nothing. Not a shadow, not a blur. You effectively cease to exist visually. You are lying on the stone flagstones of the side chapel. The cold from the floor is seeping up through your gambeson, bypassing the straw insulation and settling into your marrow. But the cold is manageable. The darkness is psychological torture. Your brain, deprived of visual input, begins to panic. It starts to hallucinate. This is a phenomenon known as the Ganzfeld effect, or at least a low-light version of it. You start seeing swirling patterns of color, phantom flashes, and shapes that look suspiciously like the demons from that doom painting you saw earlier. Is that a gargoyle moving in the corner? Or is it just your optic nerve firing random distress signals? You close your eyes. It makes no difference. You drift into a fitful, shallow sleep, your body exhausted from the trauma of the battlefield and the fire. But then, a few hours later, you wake up. Your eyes snap open. You are wide awake. You check your non-existent watch. It feels like 1 a.m. In the modern world, you would call this insomnia. You would reach for your phone and doom scroll until you passed out again. But here, this isn't a disorder. This is normal. Welcome to biphasic sleep. Before the Industrial Revolution and the advent of cheap artificial lighting, humans didn't sleep in one solid 8-hour block. They slept in 2 segments. There was the first sleep, or dead sleep, which lasted until around midnight. Then, everyone woke up. They would stay awake for an hour or 2, a period known as the watch, or simply watching. Then, they would go back to sleep for the second sleep, or morning sleep. Historians still argue whether this segmented sleep pattern was hardwired into human biology and destroyed by electric light, or if it was merely a cultural adaptation to the long, boring winter nights. Regardless of the cause, everyone is doing it. Right now, all over the village, people are awake in the dark. They are praying, stoking the fire, telling stories, or given the lack of privacy and entertainment options, conceiving the next generation of peasants. But you are alone in a crypt-like church. You have no fire to stoke. You have no one to talk to. You are just lying there in the void, listening. And the church is loud. Stone expands and contracts with temperature changes. The massive limestone blocks groan as the night air cools them. The timber roof beams creak like the ribs of a dying whale. The wind whistles through the gaps in the leaded glass windows, creating a low, mournful moaning sound. To your modern, rational mind, these are structural noises. To your medieval, terrified mind, these are the voices of the purgatorial dead. You remember the dead bell you heard earlier? The belief is that the souls of the departed are closest to the earth at this hour. The veil is thin. You are in a building literally filled with dead bodies wealthy patrons are buried beneath the flagstones you are lying on. You are sleeping on a graveyard. You hear a scratching sound near the altar. Is it a mouse? Or is it a revenant clawing its way out of the crypt? You curl into a tighter ball. You try to focus on the watch. This interstitial time was often used for deep reflection or prayer. It was considered a magical time where dreams were most prophetic. But your thoughts are dark. You think about the night walkers. In the medieval legal code, walking around at night without a light and a valid reason is a crime. It is suspicious behavior. Night walking is associated with thieves, prostitutes, and witches. If the watchman, the secular police force of the town, caught you outside right now, you would be arrested immediately. The night belongs to the disorderly. By staying in the church, you are legally safe, but you feel spiritually exposed. Suddenly, you feel a pressure on your chest. It's heavy. You can't breathe. You try to move your arms, but they are paralyzed. You try to scream, but only a choked wheeze comes out. You are terrified. In 2025, a doctor would tell you this is sleep paralysis, a temporary inability to move or speak while falling asleep or waking up, often accompanied by hallucinations. Here, you know exactly what this is. This is the mare, The word nightmare comes from this very entity. The mare or night hag is a demon or goblin that sits on the sleeper's cest, crushing the breath out of them. It is a terrifyingly common folklore explanation for this biological glitch. You stare up into the darkness, convinced you can see a gnarled face leering down at you, sensing the malevolent weight pressing your ribs in the stone. You struggle, your heart rate spiking to dangerous levels. Then, just as quickly as it started, the paralysis breaks. You gasp, sucking in a lungful of cold, incense-scented air. The weight is gone. There is no demon. Just you, the stone, and the darkness. But the fear lingers. You realize that the deep dark isn't just an absence of photons. It is a presence of fear. It is a time when the rules of reality feel suspended. You understand why medieval people were so obsessed with light. Why candles were such a precious commodity that stealing one was a serious crime. Light is order. Light is safety. Darkness is chaos. You hear a bell toll in the distance. Matins. It is the first prayer of the monastic day, usually around 2 o'clock or 3 a.m. Monks are waking up right now to pray for your soul. The sound is comforting. It means you aren't the only one awake. It means civilization is still out there, holding back the tide of chaos with rhythm and ritual. You try to drift into your second sleep. It is harder this time. You are cold, hungry, and traumatized. You think about your electric blanket. You think about your nightlight. You think about the hum of the refrigerator. You realize those weren't just conveniences. They were emotional anchors. They kept the deep dark at bay. Here, there are no anchors. You are adrift in the night. As you finally begin to doze off, you hear a new sound. It is faint, coming from the squint, that hole in the wall. A low, rhythmic chanting. The anchorite is praying. It is a mournful, solitary sound, a single human voice vibrating against the stone. It should be spooky, but strangely, it lulls you. It is a reminder that endurance is possible, that even in this box of stone, in this crushing dark, life persists. You close your eyes, surrendering to the exhaustion. You have survived the day. You have survived the first half of the night. But as you slip into unconsciousness, you know that the sun is still hours away. And when it rises, it will bring the final day of your week. You have one more hurdle to clear. You have to face the seventh day. And in a world where Sunday is not for brunch, but for existential reflection, you might find that the end of your journey is the hardest part of all. The morning sun hits the stained glass window above the altar. And for the first time in your journey, the light isn't gray or terrifying. It is a kaleidoscope of ruby, sapphire, and gold, projecting a pool of colored light onto the stone floor where you slept. You blink, your eyes gritty, your body stiff as a board. You have made it. You have survived the night in the church. You have survived the week. It is Sunday, the seventh day. In the medieval calendar, this is not just a day off. It is the pivot point of existence. The cessation of labor is strictly enforced. The blacksmith's hammer is silent. The plow stands still in the field. Even the shops in the market are shuttered. The relentless grinding noise of the city and the farm is paused, replaced by the tolling of bells calling the faithful to Mass. You stand up, your joints popping like dry twigs. You are safe here, within the sanctuary. You can step out into the churchyard without fear of the sheriff, provided you don't cross the gate. You push open the heavy door and blink in the fresh morning air. The churchyard is not a somber, quiet place of mourning. It is the social hub of the parish. Here is a quirky, delightful fact. Sundays were often party days. Specifically, church ales. To raise money for church repairs or the poor, the wardens would brew massive amounts of ale and bake bread, selling it to the congregation in the churchyard. It is essentially a medieval bake sale, but everyone is getting slightly tipsy on holy beer. You see a group of men setting up a trestle table. A woman hands you a mazer, a wooden bowl of ale, and a chunk of bread. It is charity, but on this day, everyone shares. You sit on a flat gravestone, observing the scene. Men are practicing archery near the yew trees. This is mandatory. In England, the law often required men to practice with the long bow on Sundays and holidays to ensure a reserve of skilled archers for the king's wars. You watch the arrows thud into the straw targets, thinking about the battle you fled yesterday. Here, the violence is controlled, ritualized into sport. As you chew your bread checking for rocks, out of habit, you reflect on the gauntlet you have run. You look at your hands. They are unrecognizable. The fingernails are black with grime. There is a burn mark from the fire on your wrist, a blister from the billhook on your palm. In just 7 days, the Middle Ages has physically rewritten your body. You think about the water you drank. Your stomach gurgles ominously. You know that the incubation period for typhoid is about 1 to 3 weeks. The incubation for dysentery is shorter. You are currently a ticking time bomb of pathogens. Even if you survive the week without being stabbed or burned, the microscopic war inside you is just beginning. You realize with clarity that survival here isn't a state of being. It is a temporary delay of the inevitable.
You watch a family laughing together over a game of 9 men S. Morris scratched into the dirt. They look happy. This brings us to a major scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the medieval peasant S life was a ceaseless misery, or if they experienced a level of community, spiritual fulfillment, and seasonal joy that we have lost in our isolated, hyper-industrialized world. Looking at them, you see the resilience. They accept death as a neighbor. They accept hardship as the weather, because they expect so little from the material world. Every moment of peace, every cup of ale, every sunbeam feels like a miracle. You, however, cannot adapt. You are a creature of comfort. You miss the hum of electricity. You miss the concept of clean. You miss the safety net of modern medicine. You realize that you are not built for this world. Your softness is not a moral failing. It is a biological incompatibility. You are an orchid trying to survive in a field of nettles. The sun climbs higher, warming your face. For the first time all week, you are not cold. You are not running. You are simply existing. This is the Sabbath rest. It is a profound, deep breath before the struggle begins again on Monday. But for you, there will be no Monday. The timeline is correcting itself. The experiment is over. You feel a heaviness in your eyelids that has nothing to do with the nightmare. It is a gentle pulling sensation. The sounds of the churchyard, the laughter, the thwack of arrows, the chanting of the priest inside begin to fade. They sound like they are coming from underwater. The smell of wood smoke and unwashed bodies drifts away, replaced by the scent of ozone and sterile air. You lean back against the warm stone of the church wall. You are fading. The 14th century is releasing its grip on you. You have walked the mud, breathed the smoke, and bled the blood. You have seen the worst of humanity and the resilience of the spirit. You survived 1 week, and honestly, that is a miracle. Most modern humans wouldn't have made it past the water bucket on Tuesday. As your vision blurs, the last thing you see is the stained glass window glowing from the inside, a beacon of colored light in a brown world. You close your eyes, leaving the hunger, the fleas, and the fear behind. You are going home. And so the church bells fade into a soft, rhythmic hum. The stone wall against your back softens, transforming into the familiar, yielding support of your own mattress. The smell of wood smoke and damp earth dissipates, replaced by the clean, cool air of your bedroom. The grey, heavy sky of the Middle Ages lifts, revealing the quiet, comforting darkness of your own night. You are no longer a stranger in a hostile time. You are here in the present, safe and warm. The mud is gone. The cold is gone. There are no nights chasing you, no fires to fight, no invisible enemies waiting in the water. You have returned from the journey unscathed, carrying only the memory of the resilience you witnessed. Take a deep breath. Feel your lungs fill with clean, filtered air. Feel the tension leaving your shoulders, unknotting the muscles that have been hunched against the phantom cold. Your hands are clean. Your feet are warm. You are perfectly safe. Let the silence of the room wrap around you like a soft, heavy blanket. The world outside is asleep. The history books are closed. The past is a dream that has already ended. You have earned this rest. You have survived the journey, and now the only thing left to do is drift, sink deeper into the pillows. Let your breathing slow down, in and out, in and out. The centuries fall away, leaving only this moment, this peace, this quiet